If you love hospital horror stories, get ready, because today you're going to hear some chilling tales that will make even the skeptics shiver, like the story you're about to see, where an on-call doctor hears a strange crying coming from the nursery. But what she finds there is much, much worse than she ever imagined. But before we start the story, make sure you're already subscribed to the channel so you don't miss any terrifying tales. It was a cold and stormy night when I arrived at St. Clara Hospital to start my shift. That old Gothic building loomed in the darkness, with lightning illuminating its scarred walls, as if the place had witnessed things no one wanted to remember. The rain pounded hard against the dirty windows, and the heavy door creaked as I pushed it open, as if it didn't want to let me in. That sound already sent a shiver down my spine. The lobby was almost empty, except for Sarah, the head nurse at the reception desk. She greeted me with a quick nod, but her face was paler than usual under the dim light that seemed to suck the life out of the place. "Busy night?" I asked, trying to hide the unease I always felt when entering that place. Sarah sighed and looked away, as if she didn't want to face the question. "Not more than usual," she murmured, but her voice wavered, and I knew there was more to it. "You know how the night shift is." I didn't insist. I went on my rounds, but every step I took echoed through the empty corridors, as if someone were following me. The fluorescent lights flickered, casting shadows that twisted on the walls. Something was wrong. It was always wrong at St. Clara. As I approached the corridor leading to the nursery, I heard it. First, it was a low whisper, almost imperceptible, like muffled voices coming from behind the walls. I stopped. My heart raced, and then came the sound that chilled my blood, a baby's cry. But it wasn't a normal cry. It was distant, strange, as if it were floating in the air, coming from nowhere. "It's the nursery," I tried to convince myself, but as I walked towards the sound, it disappeared as if it were playing with me. Each step only increased the tightness in my chest. I entered the nursery. The soft blue light illuminated the room, but it was a cold, icy light. Rows of cribs were there, each with a sleeping baby. The scene was too calm, almost disturbingly perfect. I walked slowly between the cribs, observing each baby. They were all sleeping, breathing calmly. The cry I had heard before seemed to have been just my imagination. But something wasn't right. I felt like I was being watched, as if something were crawling up my back. In the corner of the nursery, something caught my attention. An old mirror with a dark wooden frame full of worn symbols. It didn't belong there. I stood still, between curiosity and fear, and approached. My reflection looked back, pale under the dim light. Nothing seemed out of place, until I noticed. In the depths of the mirror, something moved. One of the reflected cribs was different. A baby was there, its eyes opened, empty, black eyes like the darkness, lifeless, soulless. I froze. The blood drained from my face. Before I could react, the baby in the reflection disappeared. I turned to the corresponding crib in the real world. It was empty. I ran into the corridor, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it was going to burst. I found Sarah and couldn't hold back. "Sarah, there's something wrong in the nursery," I said, breathless. "I saw something strange." She hesitated. For a moment it seemed like she was going to deny it, but then she sighed tiredly. "You're not the first. Doctors, nurses, they've all heard things. Cries, laughter. Sometimes they feel tugs on their clothes. There's something there, Emily, something that doesn't want to be ignored." Her voice was low, almost a whisper, as if she were afraid something might hear. "Parents have avoided the nursery for years. Many disappear. There was one time." Sarah stopped, her voice failing. "A man came back desperate, saying the baby in the nursery wasn't his son." I felt the ground disappear from beneath my feet. Something dark pulsed in the walls of that hospital. It wasn't just my imagination. I decided I was going to find out what was happening, and I started exploring the forgotten corners of the building. That's how I found the corridor. A corridor that shouldn't exist. The walls were covered in mold, and the smell of decay filled the cold air. The silence was heavy, as if something were sucking all the sound. At the end of the corridor, there was a locked door, old, cracked. Attached to the wood, a yellowed piece of paper, almost disintegrated. On it, written in white chalk, a single phrase: "The sleep is not real." The words seemed to vibrate, echoing in my mind like a silent threat. I touched the doorknob. It was icy cold. A muffled sound came from behind the door, as if something were moving. I almost opened it. Almost. But something stopped me. A warning, like a whisper in my mind, telling me not to go further. Not yet. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the anguished cries of babies echoing through the empty corridors of the hospital. The sleep is not real. Nothing was. And something on the other side of that door was still waiting. With a stronger push, the door creaked and opened slowly, revealing a hospital room. But something was terribly wrong. The smell of mold and rust filled the air. It was as if that place had been isolated from time, untouched for decades. The dim light from the corridor barely illuminated the room, and I had to turn on my flashlight to see. And then I saw. In the center of that abandoned room, a rusted bed with yellowed sheets lay under layers of dust. On the deteriorated mattress, an old medical chart was open, its pages wrinkled with time. My hands trembled as I flipped through the papers, trying to decipher what was before me. Project Shadows was the title that appeared most often. The descriptions were disturbing. Experiments conducted decades ago involving abandoned babies, receptacles, fragments, and something worse. Mentions of pacts with incomprehensible forces beyond the human. The air in the room grew denser, colder. A low sound began to echo like a child's laughter, weak at first but growing, transforming into something wrong. The laughter became guttural and distorted, mixing with stifled screams. I turned, the flashlight trembling in my hands. The shadows on the walls moved on their own, dancing unnaturally. Then it appeared. In the center of the room, as if emerging from the floor itself, a tall, hooded figure began to form. The eyes, two glowing points like embers, fixed on me, and the voice that came was not human. It was as if the hospital itself were speaking, as if the darkness around had a voice. "Dr. Emily, you are next. The cycle must continue." I tried to step back, but my legs seemed stuck. "What do you want? What is this?" I whispered, struggling to keep my voice steady. The Keeper of Shadows did not move, but its words spread like an invisible poison. "The babies you saw, they are not what they seem. They are fragments, pieces of something ancient, disguised in fragile human forms. The nursery is just a facade. This hospital is a portal. Here, the veil between worlds thins, and they wait. Hungry. Every cycle, someone must be delivered. Now, it's your turn." My mind raced. No, that couldn't be true. I didn't believe in absurd stories, but the hooded figure remained motionless, the shadows around beginning to close in on me. Laughter, cries, and whispers infiltrated my ears, mixing into a maddening cacophony. Desperate, I managed to break free and ran. The Keeper did not follow, but I felt its presence pursuing me, as if it were inside my own shadow. I didn't know where I was going until I found myself in the old hospital laboratory. Breathless, I began to rummage through dusty drawers and files. Finally, I found something. An old diary, with fragile, yellowed pages. A forgotten doctor had recorded everything. The instructions were clear. A ritual could break the cycle, seal the portal, and free the trapped souls. But the warning was as clear as the ritual. The cost will be high. I knew I had no choice. Gathering the materials described, I returned to the nursery. The place was unrecognizable. The cribs were empty, swaying slightly as if something invisible were touching them. The air was almost impossible to breathe, dense and icy. The shadows gathered on the ceiling, swirling in spirals like a living storm. They were waiting for me. I took a deep breath and began the ritual, reading the words from the diary with a firm voice, despite the fear consuming me. The shadows trembled. The cries began again, growing into screams of agony. Something in the room seemed to react, an ancient fury. I felt as if invisible hands were trying to pull me, steal my voice, my soul. "I will succeed. I will free them," I shouted as I continued to recite. The lights began to flicker frantically. I felt the floor vibrate as if the hospital itself were resisting. Then everything went dark. The silence that followed was absolute, suffocating. For a moment I believed I had won, but then I felt it. A hand, cold as ice, resting on my shoulder. I turned slowly. The keeper of shadows was there, its glowing eyes fixed on mine. "You cannot free them. They are part of you now." Before I could react, the shadows lunged at me. The darkness invaded every piece of my mind, my soul, my memories. I tried to scream, but no sound escaped. The void consumed me entirely. When the nursery lights came back on, I was there, standing in the center of the room. My face wore a cold, empty smile, like that of a broken doll. My eyes, once full of life, were now two bottomless caverns. The next morning, Sarah found me at the reception desk, as if nothing had happened. My appearance was the same, but something was wrong. I seemed different. My movements were mechanical, and my eyes hid a darkness Sarah couldn't explain. That night, the cries in the nursery echoed louder than ever, and in the silence of the corridors, something laughed. The cycle had begun anew. Chilling, isn't it? What did you think of the story? What rating from 0 to 10 would you give it? Leave your opinion in the comments below. And stay tuned, because the story you're about to hear next takes the discomfort to another level, where a simple hospital becomes a scene of mysteries and inexplicable disappearances. Imagine going to pick up a loved one and discovering that they never existed in the eyes of those who were supposed to care for them. I parked the car in front of Central St. Vincent Hospital, and the night seemed alive, you know. Like it was breathing around me, heavy, suffocating, as if the air carried some ancient, rotten secret. The building in front of me was terrifying, with those worn-out walls and windows lit by a pale, sickly light. It looked like a giant tomb, just waiting to swallow anyone foolish enough to enter. But I had no choice. I was there for Andrew, my brother, and nothing else mattered. As soon as I walked through the automatic doors, the silence swallowed me. It wasn't a normal silence, no. It was the kind of emptiness that screams in your ears, a warning you can't understand. The hum of the fluorescent lights seemed to beat in time with my racing heart. At the reception, a woman sat behind the counter. She had curly blonde hair, but it looked abandoned, as if time had given up on her. And her eyes, empty, avoiding mine. "Good evening," I said, and my voice echoed in that place, breaking the silence like an intruder. "I'm here to visit my brother, Andrew. He was admitted 3 days ago after a car accident." The receptionist froze. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitant, as if they knew typing that name would open a door that should stay locked. "What's his name?" she asked without lifting her face. "Andrew Santos, trauma unit," I was told. She typed slowly. Each key she pressed sounded like a hammer in my head. When she frowned and replied, her voice was almost a whisper. "We don't have any patient by that name. Are you sure this is the right place?" That sentence chilled me to the bone. "Of course I am. I brought him here myself. I saw the ambulance coming through that entrance." I pointed to the side door, feeling my blood boil. "Check again. Andrew Santos, 32 years old, victim of an accident." For a moment she seemed about to say something, but changed her mind. She just shook her head slowly. "There's no one by that name. Maybe it's a mistake." A mistake? Impossible. I knew Andrew had been taken there. Without wasting more time, I turned around and headed straight for the administrative office. Someone there had to have answers. If not, I would force them out. As I walked through the corridors, the hospital became more oppressive. There was no movement, just that morbid silence. The place didn't seem alive, and the few people I saw passed quickly, looking at the ground like shadows trying to disappear. That wasn't normal. Nothing there was normal. The administrative office was in chaos. The ajar door revealed desks covered in files scattered on the floor, as if someone had hastily rummaged through everything. But the cabinets were empty. I stopped, feeling the weight of the air pressing down on me. Where were the records? Where were the files? That's when I saw the drawer. A jammed drawer. I forced it open, and what I found made my heart stop for a second. First, a wristwatch with a cracked screen. I picked it up, feeling my fingers tremble. It was Andrew's. Then, a pair of glasses bent and scratched. And finally, a hospital bracelet. The letters were faded, but I could make out one word: Andrew Santos. My stomach sank. If Andrew had never been there, why were his belongings hidden? What else were they hiding? Before I could think, a sound made me spin around. Footsteps. Someone was behind me. The figure that entered the room was a man in a white coat. He looked nervous, trying to hide it, but failing. "You shouldn't be here, sir. This area is restricted," he said, his voice trying to be firm but trembling. I stepped forward, holding the objects as evidence. My brother, Andrew Santos, was admitted here. Now I find this hidden. I raised the belongings, my voice rising with anger and fear. "Tell me what's going on." The man swallowed hard, looking around as if searching for someone. I remember him," he whispered. "He arrived on Tuesday. He was injured but conscious. I took him to the second floor myself." "What? Then why?" Before I could finish, the door was violently thrown open. An overwhelming presence invaded the room. Dr. Mitchell. The hospital director was tall, imposing, with cold eyes that seemed to see into the darkest corners of the soul. "Any problem here?" His voice was firm, almost cutting. The nurse backed away immediately, pale. "No, sir. Just explaining to the visitor that this area is closed." I faced the doctor undeterred. "My brother is missing, and I have proof that he was here. Why are you lying to me?" "Doctor," Mitchell looked at me for a moment that seemed like an eternity before responding, each word dripping ice. "Your brother was never in this hospital. Go home, sir." It was like a punch to the gut. Something was very wrong there. Even if everyone denied it, I knew. That place was hiding something. When I left the office, I felt like I was being watched. Every step I took echoed too loudly, and another sound, almost imperceptible, followed my movements. Someone, or something, was following me. And I was sure of one thing. I wasn't leaving, not without Andrew. Marie retreated into the shadows of the corridor, her eyes wide and her voice low, as if the very air might betray her. "The whispers, the doors, they should never have been opened," she murmured, her fingers clutching the scarf around her neck as if fearing suffocation. Before I could stop her, she disappeared into the gloom, leaving behind only the feeling that I had been warned too late. The emptiness around me was oppressive, but something inside me burned stronger: conviction. If Andrew was in that forbidden sector, I would find him, no matter what I had to face. Alone again, I walked through the increasingly desolate corridors of the hospital. The silence seemed alive, growing around me as if something were watching. In an abandoned maintenance room, a rusty iron bar caught my attention. I grabbed it like a survivor grabs a weapon. Soon after, I found a locked cabinet. With furious blows, I forced the lock until it gave way. And there, among syringes and empty vials, an old key gleamed in the dim light. Engraved on the metal, an inscription: FS. My heart almost stopped. Forbidden sector. I moved forward, the corridors narrowing as I advanced. The air grew heavier, humid, and cold. When I found the steel door marked with a faded warning, "Restricted entry," an almost instinctive sensation made me hesitate. Something on the other side shouldn't be seen, but I couldn't turn back. With the key trembling in my hand, I turned it and heard the dry click of the lock. The door opened, releasing a gust of cold air that smelled of iron, blood, and decay. As I crossed the threshold, I felt as if I had entered another world, a world that whispered my name. The underground sector was a labyrinth of dark corridors, where the flickering light of old lamps only accentuated the shadows around. On the walls, old photos of patients seemed to watch me. The faces were a grotesque distortion, eyes too black, smiles too wide. With each step, The sound of distant moans and humming machines guided me toward something I didn't want to find, but needed to. In a nearby room, I stumbled upon a pile of files. I searched through them with trembling, cold hands, my heart pounding in my throat. Among the listed names, Andrew's appeared like a blade, but the attached photo made me recoil. Andrew was unrecognizable, thin, pale, and marked by strange scars that didn't match the accident. My God, I whispered, almost breathless. Following the increasingly loud sounds, I entered a room that seemed straight out of a nightmare. Surgical lights cast a sickly glow over the environment, revealing gurneys lined up in rows like tombs. Bodies lay there, some breathing weakly, connected to tubes and machines, others motionless, dissected, their skin stitched like abandoned dolls. In the center of the room, I saw Andrew. My brother was unconscious, strapped to the gurney like an animal in a butcher shop. Tubes entered and exited his chest, fresh scars crisscrossing his pale skin. I ran to him, feeling despair consume my mind. "Andrew! Andrew!" I called, holding my brother's cold hand. "I'll get you out of here. Hold on." But before I could do anything, firm footsteps echoed behind me. I turned abruptly and saw Dr. Mitchell enter, followed by nurses and security guards. The director's figure seemed to grow under the cold light, his face impassive, but his eyes gleamed with something perverse. "I warned you to leave, Ralph," Mitchell said, his voice calm, almost patient, but laced with threat. "But you didn't listen." "What have you done to my brother?" I shouted, feeling anger replace fear. "What is all this?" Mitchell walked slowly to an empty gurney, examining it like a sculptor inspects his work. "Andrew was a volunteer," he replied in an almost casual tone. "Or perhaps volunteer is a generous word. He, like the others, contributed to something greater than himself. Innovative methods. Progress." "Progress? You're killing people!" I yelled, holding Andrew's hand tightly, as if I could protect him from that hell. "Doctor," Mitchell laughed softly, a sound that seemed inhuman in the silence. "Madness is what you call something you don't understand, Ralph. This is the future, a future that doesn't involve you." Before I could react, the security guards grabbed me. I fought like a cornered animal, kicking and screaming, but it was too late. Dr. Mitchell approached, a syringe gleaming in his gloved hand. "You were so concerned about your brother that now you'll have the opportunity to join him," Mitchell whispered, like a death sentence. I felt the cold of the needle pierce my skin, and the world around me began to spin. The voices became distant, the metal ceiling dissolving into darkness. When I woke up, I could no longer feel my body. My eyes opened with difficulty, revealing the steel ceiling of that cursed room. Beside me, I saw Andrew, motionless, but his lips were moving. He was whispering something, but I couldn't hear. Then I felt it, the tubes being inserted into my skin, the heartbeat of the cardiac monitor marking the end. The sound was too loud, deafening, like bells from a condemned church. And then everything went dark. In the corridors above, the receptionist adjusted her disheveled hair and smiled with empty sympathy at another unsuspecting visitor. "Good evening. Can I help you?" What fear? Sometimes true terror is hidden in places where there should only be cure and hope. And the terror continues, because the story you're about to hear reveals what happens when deeper, darker secrets intertwine in the corridors of a hospital. I opened my eyes, my vision blurry as if I had just woken from a nightmare. The voices around me were distant, muffled, as if underwater. I tried to remember what had happened, but my head throbbed as if someone had hammered my skull. The car accident. Yeah, I remembered the impact, the shattering glass, the scream. And now, here I was, at St. Mark's Hospital. A place that looked more like a horror movie set. Narrow hallways, cracked walls, a musty smell that clung to the throat. Everything there seemed sick, as if the building itself was rotting from the inside. As they wheeled me to the inpatient ward, something caught my attention. Room 404. The door was closed, locked, and in the middle of it was an old, damp, crumpled piece of paper. The word "avoid" was written in a crooked, shaky manner, as if someone had scribbled it in a fit of desperation. A chill ran down my spine. I looked away, but that feeling that something was wrong wouldn't leave me. It was as if the room emanated a heavy, suffocating energy. And the strangest thing, no one seemed to notice. It was as if room 404 was invisible to everyone but me. That first night, the hospital's silence was broken by a sound that made my blood run cold. Dragging footsteps. Slow, heavy, as if someone was dragging their feet down the hallway. I held my breath, trying to convince myself it was just my imagination. But then the whispers started. They came from room 404. Low, almost inaudible but filled with an anguish that made me want to scream. I approached the door, looked through the little window, and saw a faint flickering light, like a candle about to go out. I tried the doorknob, but it was locked. The hallway was empty. I returned to my bed, but the feeling of being watched wouldn't leave me. Something there didn't want me to forget about room 404. The next day, still disturbed, I sought out Dr. Albright, the head nurse. "What's in room 404?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, but fear had already taken hold of me. He stopped what he was doing and looked at me with a dark, tense expression. "Forget it, Liam. Rest and don't meddle where you shouldn't." His response only made me more suspicious. Something was wrong, and I knew it. On the third day, I met Olivia, a pale patient with sunken eyes and a vacant expression. We talked in the almost deserted cafeteria. "Room 404, she whispered, holding her teacup with trembling hands. "They try to hide it, but it's there. No one who entered that room came back to tell the tale. You'd better drop it." The fear in her eyes was real, and I felt the weight of her words. But I couldn't give up. I needed to know what was there. I decided to investigate. I asked other patients, the nurses, but everyone avoided the subject. It was as if room 404 was a taboo, something so dangerous that just mentioning it brought bad luck. Until, on a rainy night, driven by an impulse, I rummaged through the supply closet and found an old rusty key. It was the key to destiny, I knew. My footsteps echoed through the empty hallway. When I reached room 404, I stopped. Rusty chains were fastened to the door, as if trying to contain something horrific. Near the doorknob, bloody fingernail marks indicated that someone had tried to escape from there. From inside, the whispers grew louder, became more intense, until they turned into frenzied, muffled screams. My hands trembled with fear as I unlocked the chains. Suddenly, the other patients appeared in the hallways. Motionless, with distorted, shadowy faces, they looked at me with empty eyes and began to murmur in unison. "Liam, Liam." I swallowed hard, sweat running down my face, but I didn't back down. I had to know. Finally, I opened the door. A wave of putrid air, smelling of blood, hit me. The room was shrouded in darkness, but I could see red stains on the walls, grotesque symbols drawn on the floor. It was a nightmare scene, a macabre ritual. In the center of the room, a grotesque figure emerged from the shadows. It was tall, skeletal, with elongated and twisted limbs. The skin looked like a jigsaw puzzle of flesh sewn together haphazardly. The eyes glowed with a demonic light, and the mouth opened into a smile so wide it seemed like a mistake of nature. "You've come." The creature's voice was a deep, echoing whisper. I recoiled, but it advanced. I tried to run, but the hospital had turned into a labyrinth. Hallways stretched endlessly, doors disappeared. Behind me, the creature followed, dragging its deformed feet, while the other patients, now deformed as well, joined the chase. I ran, but I knew survival would demand something of me, something I wasn't sure I could give. When I finally managed to get out, the sun was already shining on the horizon. On the outside, I seemed intact. But on the inside, the whispers still echoed in my mind, the dragging footsteps haunting me. That night, as I tried to sleep, I heard the footsteps in the dark again. Room 404 wasn't going to let me go. Ever. Terrifying, isn't it? Apparently, not all of a hospital's secrets are meant for healing. Some are destined for the worst of horrors. The story you're about to hear reveals how the dark truth between hallways and counterfeit medicines can turn a simple hospital into a scene of unspeakable horrors. But before we continue with the story, if you've made it this far, It means you're enjoying our stories, so go ahead and leave a like to let YouTube know you like this kind of content and don't miss any more horror stories. I woke up with a start, my chest rising and falling rapidly, as if I had just emerged from a suffocating nightmare. The smell of ether and disinfectant invaded my nose like a razor, pulling me back to reality in a brutal way. I blinked a few times, trying to open my eyes, but they were heavy, as if they had been glued shut while I slept. The dim light of the room cast an uncomfortable glow over the white, impeccably clean walls. Everything seemed cold, sterile, strange. I tried to move my body, but it was as if I was trapped. A sharp pain spread from my muscles to my bones. The accident. It flashed in my mind. The crash. The shattering glass. The brutal impact. And now I was there, lying, motionless, surrounded by that oppressive silence. A void that seemed to swallow me little by little. It was then that I felt it. The air changed. Something different. A new smell came from the hallway. It was dense, rotten, with a metallic touch that made my stomach turn. It wasn't the normal smell of a hospital. It wasn't anything that should have been there. I closed my eyes tightly, trying to ignore that bad feeling that clung to my chest. But it didn't work. Sleep didn't return. Instead, the sounds came. At first, whispers, low, almost imperceptible, as if the air itself was conspiring against me. It seemed like a distant conversation, but I couldn't make out the words. Then came the footsteps, slow, dragging. Each step against the floor echoed like a hammer against my skull. I turned my head towards the door, and that's when I saw it. A shadow quickly passed by the small window of the door. My heart stopped for a second. I held my breath, fixed my eyes there, waiting for anything, but the footsteps disappeared, as if they had never been there. In the following days, paranoia began to eat away at me. Every pill they gave me had a strange taste, a chemical bitterness that made my stomach turn. Something was wrong. I could feel it. That night, I decided to act. When the nurse entered with the medicines, I pretended to swallow and hid the pill under my tongue. As soon as she left, I spat the pill into the glass of water and watched. The pill dissolved into a dark, sticky spiral. That wasn't normal. That's when the screams started. In the next room, a man went into convulsions, his body twisting in a way that didn't seem human. Shortly after, an old woman started screaming. A horrible sound, as if her very soul was being torn out. Her eyes rolled back, showing only the whites. A suffocating terror took over the environment. The patients were getting worse. And the doctors, the nurses, they seemed oblivious, as if none of it was happening. That's when she appeared. Isabella, a young nurse but with deep, exhausted eyes. She approached my bed that night, her steps light as if she was fleeing from something I couldn't see. When she got close, she whispered quickly, "You noticed, didn't you? They're tampering with the medicines." I felt a shiver run down my spine. My stomach sank. "What's happening here?" My voice came out in a whisper. She looked around nervously, as if even the shadows were listening. "I can't say much, but they're not taking care of you. They're testing. You're guinea pigs." "Testing what?" I asked. But before Isabella could answer, she disappeared down the hallway with the same ghostly speed with which she had appeared. That night, I gathered all the strength I had left and dragged myself out of the room. My body ached. Each step was a torment, but I needed to find out the truth. I went to the hospital pharmacy and started searching the records. What I found made my blood run cold. The medications had incoherent names. The batches seemed old, but the bottles were new. Among the notes, one name appeared repeatedly: Dr. Victor. I followed his trail to a back door of the hospital. Almost hidden, it led to the basement. The metallic smell intensified as I descended. At the bottom of the stairs, absolute horror awaited me. Rooms with grotesque medical equipment, bodies strapped to machines, patients reduced to shadows of what they once were. Masked doctors performed indescribable procedures, mute as ghosts. The floor trembled and a deep voice echoed from the shadows. "Interesting. You shouldn't be here." I turned and saw Dr. Victor. Tall, cold eyes, a smile hidden under the surgical mask. "What is this?" I shouted. "You're killing people." He took a step forward holding a syringe. "We're not killing. We're saving. Absolute control over mind and body. Sacrifices are necessary." Panic took over me. I saw chemical bottles on a shelf and, in a desperate impulse, threw one against the machines. The explosion caused a fire. I ran for the stairs as the fire devoured everything. When I got out, the hospital was already in flames. But as I looked back, I saw a masked silhouette in the shadows. The horror wasn't over. It would never be over. What horror? What did you think of the story? What rating from 0 to 10 would you give it? Leave your opinion here in the comments. It was one of those days, you know. The kind where the sky seems glued to the ground, heavy, oppressive. Santa Clara General Hospital seemed even more sinister than usual. The rain tapped lightly on the windows, that sound that should have been relaxing, but only increased the tension. The smell of alcohol and disinfectant clung to the air, mixed with something else, something I couldn't quite define. I, Dr. Vincent, started my shift with a lump in my throat. Something was wrong. Very wrong. It wasn't just the weather, no. It was the whole hospital. That place I admired so much, which was supposed to be a sanctuary of healing, was giving me the chills. And it wasn't just my imagination. Patients who should have been recovering, smiling, grateful for life began to die. Out of nowhere, without explanation. The records? Nothing. Just unanswered questions. I walked through the corridors, greeting the technicians, the nurses, trying to keep up the appearance of normality. But my eyes couldn't stop noticing strange things. Names disappearing from the files, surgeons who never existed. It was as if the hospital had a secret, something no one wanted to admit, but it was there, looming, watching me. Then came Charlie's surgery. A young athlete, healthy, strong. The team was strange, too quiet. And the surgeon, that surgeon, he was there, but not really, you know. It was like a shadow, a presence you could feel but couldn't focus on. The operating room light shone on him, but he seemed to slip between the rays, as if he were made of darkness. And then, it happened. A mistake. A cut where it shouldn't have been. The blood gushed out and didn't stop. Charlie didn't make it. I stood there, paralyzed, not understanding how something so basic, so routine, had gone so wrong. But that wasn't a mistake. That was something more. That night I couldn't sleep. I dove into the records, questioned other residents, but no one seemed to notice what I was seeing. Until I met Dr. Helen. She was a senior surgeon, knew every nook and cranny of that hospital. We met in a dark corner of the cafeteria and she whispered almost voicelessly, "Vincent, there's someone no one sees. A surgeon who isn't in the records. He's not among us, but everyone who crosses his path disappears, or worse." A chill ran through my entire body. I didn't want to believe it, but it made too much sense, and the nights only got worse. Horrible sounds echoed through the empty corridors, scalpels cutting, muffled screams, whispers coming from nowhere. I woke up sweating, feeling like someone was watching me, someone who shouldn't have been there. Desperate, I went to the central computer, where the security cameras kept everything. In the video, distorted, low quality, I saw him, the masked surgeon. He moved too fast, almost as if he wasn't human. The mask covered his face, but the evil that emanated from him was palpable. It was as if he knew I was watching. Following the clues, I arrived at a forbidden corridor, locked for years. I forced my way in. It was a dark place full of old, improvised surgical equipment. Handwritten documents in red ink revealed things I didn't want to believe. Obscure rituals, sacrificed souls, procedures that went far beyond any medical protocol. And then, I found him. In the central room of the hospital, the masked surgeon was waiting for me. Darkness took over everything, and I felt my heart being crushed, as if he had his hands around my chest. I knew I only had one chance, to use my own body as bait. It was a brutal confrontation. I used everything I knew, every piece of medical knowledge, every drop of strength I had left. And in the end, I won. I destroyed the equipment, burned the documents. The hospital seemed to return to normal, but I didn't. The red mark on my arm is proof, a deep scar that will never go away. I left Santa Clara, but the feeling of being followed never disappeared. He's still there, in every dark corner, in every whisper of the walls. I am a marked man, both outside and inside. The masked surgeon may have disappeared, but his shadow, that I will carry forever. If you're still here, it's because this story stuck with you like that feeling that something's off in the hospital. And if you love this kind of mystery that messes with your head, let's keep going on this journey. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what's coming next. Tell me in the comments if you also felt that chill when the surgeon appeared in the security footage. Drop a "I'm seeing things" so I know you're here till the end. And if the video has kept you hooked until now, leave a like so we know you're part of this investigation. After all, stories like this are better when we unravel the mysteries together. And for those who want more, there's a video right here about an even weirder case that happened in an abandoned hospital. Just click and continue with me on this journey. Catch you later, and keep an ear out for the sound of scalpels at night, okay?